Back to the Morning Blend. Are you worried about the amount of time your children spend on video games? Since the shutdown, many kids are continuing to stay up until the wee hours of the morning gaming with friends online. Not that I would know anything about that, of course. Dr. Melissa Westendorf is the founder of the Technology Wellness Center. She is here to answer the question, is excessive video gaming bad for your kids? Hey, doctor.
Hey, sounds like your house is like my house, huh?
Yeah, and I always feel a little bit better just because you're a tech expert and you're on top of all this stuff that your kids do it too.
Yes, unfortunately. So there's a little good
So,
news and a little news that we need to be concerned about, but overall good news. I thought this would be timely. It's a study that just came out in early 2020 talking about looking at, is there a problem with video game use over time? So what
okay,
this
so
study
let's
did
talk
is
about
they
it.
looked at like 385 kids, and over half of them were actually girls. And they looked at them trying to look at gender, depression and anxiety. They looked at behavioral outcomes, including like increased aggression or empathy, decreased empathy. They tried to look at delinquency and even like problem cell phone use. And then they also measured these kids on shyness and then financial stability. And so, how they set up the study is they took all these kids at time one, and they're all very similar at time one. And then they measured them every year for 6 years. So, this was a great way to look at adolescents. I think the average age was 14 to 16 in the beginning, and then measure them over time to see if there's any effect of increased video game use. So it was a great way to look at in the future, so to speak. So what they did find was that in approximately 10%, so it's a significant minority, but the top 10% were considered having this pathological use of gaming and video gaming. And so that means, if you kind of compare it to a gambling disorder, like some of those same characteristics, they want to use it more over time. They can't withdraw from it. There's maybe rage when they're done, but it's really disruptive to their life. Okay. Then they had a second group that had like moderate symptoms. So maybe they wouldn't have met the criteria for a full internet gaming disorder, but they had a significant number of the symptoms. And then they had a third, which was 72% of these kids that didn't have any pathological use. So they didn't meet the criteria for any for the video game using. And so then again, if you remember, I said they looked at them over time once a year. And what they found is in that top 10%, they actually increased their use over time, and they had much more negative outcomes on several of those measures I talked about, increasing anxiety, increased depression, increased aggression, the social, like increased shyness as well. And then in the moderate group, they actually also had some of those concerns, primarily related to the aggression, the decreased empathy, and then what was it? There's a third one. I think the shyness factor. But they didn't show those same symptoms related to the increased cell phone use and anxiety. So there's a little bit of difference between the moderate and the increasing. But again, when they looked at them over time, there's that 72% that were not pathological using in the beginning and stayed pretty steady over time. And if you remember, all of them measured the same on anxiety measures, depression measures, all of those measures at time one, but they looked different at time 6. So I just thought it was an interesting study. Again, the vast majority of kids, all right. It's just that top 10% and maybe into the next 20% that we have to have, at least try to target some interventions for them.
I'm fascinated by the fact that you measured things that were measured were like shyness and financial ability. I guess
Yeah.
because our time is almost up, doctor, tell us, what can you do if you're in that 10% where it's pathological use, or you're maybe even in that second group and you're concerned? What should you do as a parent? Should you get professional help?
I would say at that time you should. One of the things about with the increasing uses, as these kids emerged into adulthood, 1920, because they had increased freedom, right? They're going to college. they weren't able to manage it, and their use went up because they had fewer controls. So I would say targeted intervention early could be helpful in terms of trying to control that later on.
And you mentioned some of those symptoms are inability to withdraw, maybe having rage after they have to quit gaming, maybe losing a lot of sleep.
Right. If it becomes dysfunctional for the life of the kid, so it's not necessarily a concrete number of hours, okay? Is it disruptive and dysfunctional for that child?
Fascinating. Doctor, thank you so much for your time this morning. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Interesting to share the latest research on video gaming. And to rewatch this segment or to learn more about Dr. Westendorf, head to our website, themorningblend.com. And again, she's with the Technology Wellness Center.